Yo, what's good, everybody? Once again, I reached infinite in Marvel Snap. In this video, I want to take you through the 4 decks that were the most successful for me and really catapulted me from 73rd rank and getting us to infinite, including one deck that had a 71% win rate. However, before we get into all that, I want to just say that this is probably gonna be the easiest climb to infinite that we might ever see in Snap. So if you're going to push for infinite, this is probably the best time to do it. The reason I say that is because a lot of people that were above the 105 rating automatically started with a much higher rank than they were supposed to. Normally at reset, people go down to 70 if they were in infinite, but there was a lot of people that were already infinite to start. You're actually gonna be facing a lot of bots on the way up to infinite, and the reason that the decks that I'm gonna talk about work against bots and against humans is because they all kind of have the common theme of being smaller decks that don't give you prio and then give you a huge burst at the end and gives you a massive turn 6 that ends up winning you the game with a lot of points on board. And the first deck that I want to talk about is this Bounce Spider deck. It's not exactly your stereotypical Ghost Spider deck. However, I did have a really solid amount of success with it. I was 8-4 with it, 67% win rate, but it is something that I'd like to experiment with more on stream or maybe on a YouTube video, because this deck was a lot of fun to play and was really good. You have the cards like Vulture and Human Torch that you're kind of bouncing around with Iron Fist and Ghost Spider, and then you got Beast to kind of beast that Iron Fist and Human Torch back to your hand, or the Hood, Iceman. You know, it's almost like a typical bounce deck, but it has its move elements that really kind of capitalize on Ghost Spider, and I felt like it was going to be really successful. I was having a ton of fun with it, and we went 8-4 with it. So I wanted to give that like a special mention. That is kind of like the number 4 deck on the list. The next deck that I want to talk about is this Silver Surfer deck that utilizes a lot of move cards and had a 58% win rate for me. As you can see, I actually played this a lot. 29 and 21, we had a net 21 cubes because of this deck. I would normally say that a Silver Surfer move shell is really not the way to go, but actually this deck was pretty incredible. I did not create it. My buddy Blopey introduced me to this deck, showed it to me, and I believe he said it was from Safety Blade, who is a great creator in his own right. He creates really interesting decks, and this is one of them. This deck really utilizes all these great 3-cost cards that your opponent is not expecting to be a part of a Surfer deck. They're gonna think it's just a regular old move deck once you put out Iron Fist and Kraven, but in reality, you're looking to utilize these Kingpin, Vulture, Juggernaut, Doctor Strange, Polaris, all these different move cards that cost 3 power, and then at the end you're gonna hit them with the Silver Surfer that's gonna do a lot of work for you. And of course, we gotta put in Miles, because Miles is really a value all-star in any type of move deck. With all the 2-cost options, this deck really utilizes being able to play 2 cards out on turn 5. One of the kind of weird things that I tried to utilize in this deck was actually dropping Cloak on turn 5 into the location that I was planning on dropping Kingpin on, because if you had prio, your Kingpin would flip up first and then their moved cards would come over and Kingpin would just stomp them out, and you just kind of baited them by them expecting you to move your cards over when in reality you were just trying to kill their cards. It didn't always work, but it was really fun if you did manage to pull it off. But realistically, this is the best deck that I've seen where you can kind of drop Kingpin on 6 and juggernaut your opponent's cards into that location, or just drop Juggernaut on turn 6 so that you can knock your opponents out of this location. Then you could put Surfer in and just kind of buff up all the other cards. This deck was a ton of fun to play, and I highly suggest you try out the move version of this deck. The next deck we're talking about is almost a cheat of a deck, because this is my Sera Miracle version, where I was basically trying to take advantage of the new Medusa buff and the new Rogue buff, but it turns out that this deck wasn't as successful as my original try of utilizing those cards outside of Rogue. This Sera Miracle deck kind of worked out pretty well. As you can see, a 58% win rate, 22 and 16. We had a lot of fun with it, and it was pretty cool. However, the next one on the list just utilizes these cards to a better extent. I wanted to mention this one in case you were interested in trying out Rogue, in case you were interested in using Jeff in your Sera Miracle decks. Bast obviously boosts every single card in this deck, especially Mysterio, Bishop, Hitmonkey, and Angela. It may have a lot of the same cards in it as the next deck that I'm going to show you, but in reality, they play completely differently as a result of that Bast and as a result of having Rogue. But this was the real Sera Miracle deck that worked out really well. 70.8% win rate. I went 34 and 14 with this deck. As you can tell by those numbers, that is no joke. 48 games played, 56 cubes won. It is pretty much the best deck that you could possibly play, in my opinion, right now, except for maybe High Evo Lockdown, which in my opinion gets kind of boring. When I try my runs to infinite, I want to use something that everybody's not using. I want to use something a little different, and Sera decks are not getting high amounts of play, but they do have massive win rates right now. Medusa's buff has really turned her into a contender to be a part of any Sera deck, because 5 power for 2 cost is really good. Yes, she is restricted to only that middle location. Yes, you might get screwed over by location, but I had a couple times where Medusa was actually the deciding factor in me winning the game. She works out perfectly in a Sera shell. The way I played this deck out is, if I got Kitty Pryde on turn 1, I was immediately playing Kitty Pryde. I know, unbelievable concept. You would have never thought of that yourself. On turn 2, if I had the choice between Angela and Kitty Pryde, I'm actually playing Kitty every single time. So if I had Kitty on turn 1, I'm playing her both on turn 1 and turn 2, pretty much no matter what. That's an automatic 4 power card. And then on turn 3, I'm dropping Angela and then Kitty into that Angela location. We're basically going to be working on only winning 1 location throughout the entire game until turn 6. Now, if you don't have Angela, if you're gonna play out a 2-drop, you don't want to keep playing Kitty over and over again, and that's the only card you want to play, well, the 2-drop that I was playing basically the entire time was Sentinel. Why? Because Sentinel's just gonna put another Sentinel back in our hand. So I would basically only play Kitty and Sentinel pretty much the whole time, working on basically 1 location, unless I was losing by enough at another location, and I drop a Sentinel in there so that I can have a little bit of power in there. And then of course on turn 5, we're dropping Sera herself, and we are looking to have a massive turn 6, where of course Hitmonkey is going to be a big key. That 8 to 10 power Kitty Pryde is going to be a big time part of it. Angela's already going to be on the board, boosted, big, strong. Bishop might be at a different location. I didn't have to worry about Angela getting too big or Bishop getting too big, because nobody's playing Shang-Chi anymore, who we do have in the deck for basically emergency purposes. Most of the time I wasn't really using him. I was much more likely to put out Medusa and Lizard and Mysterio out there than I was to play Shang-Chi on turn 6. but he's really good just in case, because obviously things don't work out in our favor all the time. But a huge key to this deck was actually having Nova and Killmonger. A lot of times I wouldn't play out Nova right away because I didn't want my opponents to know that I would have a Killmonger in hand. So if they were playing essentially a mirror deck and they were playing their own version of Kitty Pryde, I would let them have priority. Then I would drop Nova, drop Killmonger on turn 6, and then drop Kitty right after so that she can't be killed, but Nova's buffing all the cards that you have on board. It's a really great deck because you're utilizing a lot of different control cards. You're utilizing a lot of small cards that are getting bigger as a result of everything that's going on. And I just couldn't seem to lose with it. I know it's not such a mind-blowing thing to use a Sera Miracle deck, but I really think that Medusa and Kitty Pryde take Sera to a whole new level, and I just think that she becomes probably the best deck besides, like I said, a high evo lockdown deck. But realistically, this deck competes with that because when they go ahead and storm a location, well, you better go throw Bishop in that location and maybe a Lizard. Hey, that's 5 power in the stormed off location. Plus, Bishop is just doing work as you go along in the game. But let me know in the comment section below, what decks have you been trying out? What decks do you like? Have you tried this version of the Sera Miracle deck? Because I promise you're not going to be disappointed. You're really going to love it if you like those kind of big turn 6s at the end of the game. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have yourself a wonderful rest of your day.